Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when you vote. If you're eligible, tomorrow, May 7th, is your opportunity to vote in elections across the UK. So today my guest is Cosima Wiltshire, who is joining me to talk about her work building bridges between youth, tech, and politics to create a digital world for and by young people. I want to dive right into this episode, so without further ado, this is Cosima Wiltshire.
Hi, I'm Cosima Wiltshire. I'm an advocate and researcher focused on tech governance and youth engagement in democracy. I'm a member of Shout Out UK's Youth Policy Development Group and also involved really heavily in FlippGen, which is a digital wellbeing nonprofit in the UK.
That is awesome. That is a great place to get started. What made you interested in, I'm going to go with making change because I feel like you're doing that in a couple of different ways, but what made you interested in getting started with all of this work in general?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of began getting involved in sort of like advocating when I was really young. I was, I think, 12, like 2019, mostly focused on online safety because my friends and I were the victims of a lot of online harm and more so just like the really unrealistic standards that were being set for young people online, which kind of over time compounded to become harmful. And I wanted to do something about that, and I was also really interested in like tech. And so I got involved with ChildNet's Digital Leaders program and then became a champion, like a youth advisory board member, basically, with them. And I did that for like 6 years, 5 years, something like that. And then I went to uni and was kind of off the clock for a little bit, kind of finding my feet. And then February, maybe last year, I got re-engaged with kind of the advocacy space again and more like focused with policy with some work with the Australian government. They have an e-safety commission who champions this network called the Global Online Safety Regulators Network, long name, but basically was working with young people from across the world to advise and create a kind of call to action for governments and industry to follow that was kind of in line with what young people wanted. And kind of from there, snowballed. I ended up in Geneva at the UN with like the Human Rights Council a few weeks later, and then various other things. And then in the summer, I had like a really long period of time where I wasn't really doing that much, kind of firmly, because you're a first year uni student, like internships don't really exist. So I was like, what else can I do? I was really interested in all these things. And I always saw other young people like in these really cool places. I was like, how do they do that? When you go to like maybe a youth event in Parliament and there's people on those like round tables, I was like, how does that happen? Because I'm not there. And I realized that there were all these programs that organizations run to like get young people engaged in politics. And so I came across Shout Out's Youth Policy Development Group on LinkedIn, or I think it was Molly Taylor's like Youth Opportunities page, which is amazing. And anyway, I applied and then got it and kind of went from there. And about the same time, I also got involved with FlippGen and have kind of been working heavily on it since then, both from kind of like a youth democracy, like how can we counter disengagement and like low trust in institutions. That's kind of quite closely interlinked with the digital side of things. So then kind of bringing that in too. So that's kind of my shtick.
I love that. That is so wonderful. And I really resonate with that idea of like seeing people doing things. And I love that then you were like, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go find those opportunities. I'm going to figure it away. I think that's so cool and very much like the mission of this podcast. So I really appreciate the on-brandness of that all. I think that's awesome. Can you tell me about some of the experiences that you have had as part of the Youth Policy Development Group? Because I think it's a very cool opportunity, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. A big part of it is going to like engagements in Parliament. I think within the first few months of joining, maybe the first month, I'd been in Parliament like a good like once a week maybe at different events, and not just kind of in the audience this time. It was like actually speaking. So I think my favorite one I did at the beginning was there was like a select committee that was reversed around. So instead of the public viewing and the public were on the committee kind of scrutinizing, engaging with ministers and chairs of select committees for something called Parliamentary Evidence Week. And it was really cool and a very like full circle moment because Chi Honora, who is in the Science and Technology Committee, the first time I ever went to Parliament when I was like 12, presenting this charter for online safety, she was like one of the MPs we did it with. And then suddenly like I'm on like the thingamajiggy, like asking her questions. And it was really cool. So that was like the first thing I did with them. And then ever since, obviously Vote to 16 has become a really big movement. And so with Shout Out, have been like advocating with politicians and so on to try and get political literacy to come with Vote at 16, because without that, for me, I think it's really important that we support everyone, but especially young people, in making those choices when it comes to voting. Like, I think without that education, you can't really feel empowered to make your vote because you don't know what you're voting for and you don't know what it means a lot of the time anyway. And especially as a young person, like we aren't really talked to about politics that much unless your parents talk about it. And for me, I mean, my mum isn't like super political. We talk about politics, but not in that like direct democracy way. And so from my own like interest and also Shout Out as like an organization, we've been doing a fair bit of like engagement with MPs. And then maybe like December time, I don't know, a few months into the whole thing, I began also doing some social media stuff with them, which has been really cool, trying to like take the experiences we're having as like a group of young people, engage with them and like use that to kind of open the doors, those like big toll gates outside of Westminster. Because like as anyone looking in, it's pretty imposing and scary looking and like not the most inviting place, not somewhere really you might feel that welcome. But especially as a young person, you don't see many people like your age in that place. And so I was trying to kind of use social media to bust down those gates a little bit and like bring people in and along with us going to these events and like explain what things actually are. Like what on earth is a select committee? What is an APBG? Like what is a minister and the various levels of that, so that people can feel part of the process and like they also can do the same thing too. Because it's not rocket science. It's just learning to like advocate for yourself and sometimes like translate anecdotal kind of like experience, lived experience into something practical that politicians can take away, or kind of going the other way and taking like quite complicated things that you might know from your like interests and like translating it to kind of mean something to whoever you're trying to influence. And so like it's not rocket science, it's just kind of showing people that it's possible. So yeah, it's kind of been a mixture of like properly engaging in like Westminster and so on, and then also using social media to like, yeah, bring people along.
I love that. I think that that's also really important that you're showcasing the actual work that you're doing and it's not just kind of these LinkedIn like moments. I think that it's cool
Yeah.
people being able to follow along with some of your stuff. And that leads me very well to FlippGen, which I think has been such an amazing, very quick journey so far. It's been incredible to see FlippGen growing. But tell me about FlippGen. Tell me about the work that you've done with them. I know some of this, but pretend that I don't know any
Yeah.
of it. But start from the beginning.
For sure. So FlippGen is a youth-led digital wellbeing organization. So their kind of main focus is helping young people understand with and engage with the digital world in like a healthy way. They aren't like explicitly an online safety organization. They aren't like a policy-based organization. However, in the past year or so, they're only like a year and a bit old, they have developed like various different strands. And so now do like the education side of things, which is called their digital intelligence program. And it's basically peer-to-peer digital literacy that's kind of designed by Gen Z to meet the needs and concerns of Gen Alpha and their parents, but also helping Gen Z along the way because, you know, we're not like done. We're here. We're just a little bit older. And then at the same time, advocate and kind of engage more substantively with politicians and industry and government and so on to kind of reach a digital world that is built for young people. Because kind of initially the digital world was made for adults and then various like pieces of legislation were passed and kind of adult was benchmarked at like 13. And sometimes that works. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes because it's an experience often built for adults, like that doesn't meet the needs of young people. And sometimes doesn't meet the needs of anyone. And so, especially at the moment, like online safety is a really salient topic. It's kind of everywhere. It kind of blew up in January. And so we've been working pretty hard to mostly just get young people in the room, because I find that once you get the young people in there, the nuance and like the understanding, the lived experience, and in turn, the better policy follows. It's just like getting them in the door, because I mean, I sat in a lot of like these meetings and roundtables and things, and it's really interesting. And I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. But I've like gone to a lot where I'm the only young person, like, and by young, I mean like maybe like only person under 30 or something. Which 30 is young, but it's not like a child or a teenager. And I, yeah, was kind of like, we can do a little bit better than that. So FlippGen are really dedicated to kind of getting those young people where it matters. And I think, considering they're a year and a bit old, have done pretty well. I mean, we've spent a lot of time at all these like roundtable things, but more substantively meeting with MPs, working with the House of Lords to try and help them understand like the issues young people actually face, and then hopefully legislate accordingly. Have also done, I think, quite well in like engaging with other civil society, like charity organizations, because I think, having been in this space for quite a long time, I always never really understood why like nobody speaks to each other and different organizations don't speak to each other that much. And like, having now been in it more, I understand like funding is a thing and whatever. But similarly, it's really important that we work together, because otherwise there's just a lot of like duplication and a lot of, it's like, imagine what we could do if we put everything together. And so FlippGen has worked really hard to try and get unity and kind of communication between all these different stakeholders to just try and bring us to that ultimate goal. Because I think Baroness Kidron is someone who is really involved in like online safety, and something that really struck me when I first met her was she was like, don't let like that 20% we can't agree with like bulldoze the 80% that we can agree with, and like let that hold us back from making change. Paddy and I, who's my co-director, really kind of liked that sentiment and have tried to bring that forward. So yeah, their main vibe is getting young people heard and educated and having like that healthy relationship with the digital world. And it's a kind of several-fold strategy, if that makes sense.
I think that's wonderful. I'm gonna walk us back, because I feel like that is such a wonderful way for people to participate in this idea of you actually, being with politicians. The work that you've done is so, so cool. On a more fundamental level, the local elections, Senate elections, Scottish elections across the UK are taking place. When this comes out, it'll be tomorrow. So I would love for you to share, as someone who's done tons of work with different organizations, and especially with Shout Out UK, why is it important for people to vote? I'll leave it very simply. It's a huge question.
I mean, I think, it's a big question. For me, I think it's partly as a woman, I think that a lot of people worked very hard to get us that right to vote, but also as anyone, because originally it was only like really rich aristocrats that could vote. So for anyone, a lot of people have worked very hard to get us just the opportunity to have a say. And so for me, at just like a personal level, as someone like quite invested in the human rights space and everything, like I think it's like, it's worth doing. But more substantively, I think like voting isn't the only way you can make a change, but it's like a very direct kind of low effort way you can make a really big change in terms of that like rate of return. Like, voting isn't necessarily an easy feat. You have to consider lots of options. You've got to get to the place to vote or post it and everything. It's not like dumbing down the fact that it's a big thing. But in terms of what you get back out of voting, if you do engage with it, I think there's a lot, because I think people underestimate sometimes, or just it's not really communicated what local councils do. But a lot of like the services and decisions that get made in your area are not made by central government. They're devolved to local councils. So who is in charge in your like area really matters in terms of what you actually see day to day, because like government and parliament more work on like these big macro issues and kind of just work on sending money to the smaller councils. So in terms of like actually wanting to see your life change and your experience and your area change, voting in these elections really does make a difference. It's also, I think there's a bit less, from as far as I'm aware, there's much less wasted voting in local elections, because there's lower turnout often, and also it's like split up a lot more. Like you're not, the way that electoral systems work, like the majority is like really quite easy to gain. And so in big elections, like oftentimes people are like, oh my gosh, my vote is wasted because someone with like 30% of the vote won my seat. In local elections, it's much closer. Like your vote generally has such like a bigger direct impact. So it's important to vote in the general elections. But in terms of locals, like your voice really does make a difference. It can be so marginal. And I also just think, like, as young people especially, like, people really underestimate us and how much we care. And I think this could be a really good opportunity to show that, like, young people do want change. They know what they want. It's not necessarily their job to fix it, but they're trying, and we are trying and doing so much. And the grassroots stuff matters so much. But at the same time, like, that formal, like, direct democracy is also there. It's also important. And yeah, I just think it's about like getting your voice heard. Like a lot of the time, those channels for getting your voice in there, like most people aren't spending like several days a week in Westminster. Like for anyone who isn't in that position, like this is one of your key ways to like exercise your voice and your thoughts. And so, yeah, I think it's important for that. And also, I don't know, I think as a young person, if you like just freshly turned 18, like it's pretty cool to like go and like it's a fun process. And if you can't get there in person, you can postal vote it. So it's accessible. You just have to remember to bring ID because that's a new thing.
I love that. That's a very practical tip. Thank you for that. I have one more question for you, and it's along similar lines, but what advice would you want to share with young people who might want to make change in general, but they don't know how to get started with that work?
For sure. I think there's a lot of ways you can make change. Like, that's the first thing. I think it's like not a one size fits all. I think, like, firstly, something that holds a lot of people back is they just don't feel qualified. They don't feel like what they have to say is important enough. And I would say, like, please, like, put that aside because your youth is like such an asset. When it comes to like decision-making rooms, they have like the donors, they have the industry people, they've got the politicians, the diplomats, like they've got that covered. What they're missing oftentimes is the people that actually live these things to tell them what they need so that the policies can be like properly directed. So like your lack thereof of experience, like in terms of age or just like working, is an asset. It's not a liability or something that like should be looked down upon. And so I'd say like you are actively bringing something of value when you do engage. So like in terms of that as a hurdle, like put that aside. It's okay. We can get rid of that. Practically speaking as well, like looking for opportunities. As much as LinkedIn, it's kind of like, it can be annoying at times just because it's very intense. And there's a lot of pressure, especially as like a young person, like looking for jobs and everything. Like it can be scary. But I would say in terms of this space, it's a really good asset because people are constantly looking for people. I recruited like the most recent round of youth advisory members for FlippGen, like basically solely through LinkedIn and Instagram by seeing really cool people and seeing what they've done and being like, please come join us. Like you're really cool. And so I would say like both in terms of discussing what you are up to, no matter how big or small, and also actively finding opportunities, like it's kind of all on there. And there's loads of newsletters and things as well in terms of just like finding things. Like shout out, I found that opportunity through Molly Taylor's newsletter, which at the time was just on LinkedIn. And Paul, who is the founder of FlippGen, found me on LinkedIn and then messaged me. So I'd say it's a really good place. Also Instagram, but I think LinkedIn is a bit more direct. And then in terms of like having the confidence to get involved and like speak up, I'd say like it just doesn't have to be perfect. I think especially for girls, but also for everyone, like we're kind of programmed to like not do something until we're completely confident we can do it or feel like we know everything. And so then like don't go for opportunities because we just think we'll get rejected. I think a lot of the people that you're going against like don't have that perspective. And especially last year when I was applying for all of these things, like there were so many things I came across. I was like, oh no, I don't have like 6 years of experience or whatever it is, or I haven't quite done everything to make me qualified for this. And I went to my professor, I showed her my application, and I kind of alluded to what I'd done, but it wasn't clear. It was like, oh, I did this, maybe this shows this skill, and da-da-da-da-da. And she was like, no, Cosima, like you've done these things, like you're more than qualified. Big yourself up. Like you've got to be your biggest advocate. So I would say you've got to big yourself up because you are good at whatever it is you do. And also put aside that self-doubt because honestly, you can like try it, get started, figure it out on the go. I went to the UN for the first time, never done that, can't speak French, like haven't got a degree. I was a first year. I studied IOB, had not done it before. And I went and I figured it out. It was fine. Like, I think it's just taking those risks. I know at the moment things are tough. And so you're kind of like going to be more risk averse because it's a scary world. But I'd say if you have the capacity physically and emotionally to just give it a go, like people are pretty open to sending more opportunities your way. It's just that first thing. And like believing in yourself a little bit. I know I have like terrible self-confidence, but I have other people in my life, mentors and such, and friends who maybe have a little bit more and kind of push that onto me. And I've tried to just like fake it till I make it because, yeah, I think everyone else is. And it's just about like gaming the system in that way. Like no one knows 100% what's going on. You don't need to either. You just need to make people think that you do. And the rest will come later. And by doing those things, you're gaining the experience to be qualified anyway. So what goes around comes around.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be The Change Media Network. I'm working on expanding Be The Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests and incredible hosts. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. And I would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode. But until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.